If you're a pop culture junkie who loves TV, film, music, comedy, and other really important stuff, then you've come to the right place. Get ready and settle in for Classic Conversations, the best pop culture interviews in the world. That's right, we circled the globe so you don't have to. If you're ready to be the king of the water cooler, then you're ready for Classic Conversations with your host, Jeff Dwoskin.
All right, Maggie, thank you so much for that amazing introduction. You get the show going each and every time, and this was no exception. Welcome, everybody, to episode 257 of Classic Conversations. As always, I am your host, Jeff Dwoskin. Great to have you back for what's sure to be a classic for the ages. We're dialing the radio dial back. We're chatting with Lee Purcell, producer and director with the Hollywood Radio Players. Radio, you can see, an amazing project that Lee is part of, and I'm excited to dive into that with her and you in just a few seconds. And in these few seconds, just a reminder, episode 256 with Vernon Reid, one of the greatest guitarists of all time from Living Colour, was hanging with me. We're chatting UFOs, multiverses. We got into a lot of topics. Check that out, but not before you check out my incredible conversation with Lee Purcell. We're going to talk a little bit how she was discovered at 3 years old, her fascination with the radio, the Hollywood Radio Players, its connection with the Motion Picture and Television Fund, all amazing stuff, and all topics approved to be discussed during the SAG-AFTRA strike. So we're good there. No worries, everyone. Enjoy. All right, everyone. I want to introduce my next guest, actor, producer, director. We're here to talk about the Hollywood Radio Players. Great stuff. Welcome to the show, Lee Purcell.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's a great pleasure to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you about the Hollywood Radio Players, HRP. Am I cool enough to call it HRP?
You are. You are so cool.
I really want to talk about it. It's a really cool concept that you do and you execute with all these great players. But before I do that, I want to kind of dive into Lee Purcell, and I want to understand where your hopes and dreams of becoming an actress kind of came from. And because I know like you started modeling and dancing at like 3. So this is right out of the gate.
Yeah, 3. Yeah, I was pretty old.
Over the hill in terms of Hollywood.
I'm very over the hill. Oh my God. Yeah, I came in, they said, oh, you're 3, you got to be 1.5. So my family moved a lot when I was a child because of the military and other reasons. And we were in Dallas, and living in Dallas, which is such a great city. My mother and I were walking down the street. My mother was exceptionally beautiful. And some rep came up to us from Neiman Marcus, and they asked my mother if they could talk to her about my being a toddler model, a runway model at the flagship store there in Dallas. We went in, and I guess, I don't know, I don't remember all of it. I remember a great deal of it, actually, but not all of it. And I guess they gave me a little test to see if I could take direction, like, walk over there, stop, turn around, things like that, really hard. And I did. And so I got hired, and that was my first paying gig. And I think my parents were happy because I'd been lounging around the house for 3 years, doing nothing, earning nothing, just, not paying rent. And
oh, yeah, the typical 3-year-old slacker.
Yeah, a slacker. I was a total slacker, right? Messing up the house, not cleaning up anything. So I went to work and I liked it. It was fun. And I don't know if I fully grasped exactly what it was, but it was fun. I really had a good time. And I did that for, I don't know how long, quite a while. And at the same time, very classic story, studying dance. And then we moved again. I think the next place we lived, not entirely sure, was the naval base next to Memphis, Millington Naval Base. And there was by this time, I think I was around 5, there was a variety show. And somehow, I don't know how that happened, but I got on that variety show at the age of 5. And it was not every week. I did it periodically, frequently. The first thing I did was recite a poem. That's how big time this was. And then I did it for about 8 years on and off. They would call me and say, do you have anything this week you'd like to do? And it's like so weird. Things don't happen like that. Well, they do kind of, but not like that. And then as I got older, I would call them and I would say, hey, I have an idea. I choreographed this number and I'd like to come on and do it. And so I did that until I was about 13. And then I joined a performing group, a traveling performing group through my school. And we traveled all around the area regionally, all around there. By that time, we were living in Arkansas. So I joined this performing traveling group in my school, and we traveled all over that part of the country, and we did fairs and other schools and colleges and I don't know, and just whatever came our way. And there were a handful of us. I was the dancer, the choreographer. I also sang in the trio, played an instrument in the quartet. And all of that is very, it's very small time, very regional, but it was really incredible training because when you've done those kind of things, there's really nothing much that phases you because it's, it's kind of cheesy and kind of corny, but also a really, really great experience and great training. I left home as early as I could. I was 17. And then circuitously made my way to California. It took me a while. I had a job on the way. I went to college very briefly, but my whole goal, which I've been saving my money for since I was 13, was to get to California. And it was California or New York. I was like, where? California, New York? I'm not sure. But California, my grandmother lived here, even though she was bi-coastal, but she was here part of the time. And then also, I don't like cold weather. And so I chose California over New York. There you go. That's the basic of the background.
Where were you with your mom when you were 3 years old when that person saw you? Like literally, where were you? Like,
I have no idea what street it was. I was 3. But we were walking down the street and we didn't have a lot of money, but we were always well dressed as best as my mother could figure it out. And so I guess we caught someone's attention.
Do you ever think about like, the reason I asked is if maybe just I know you were 3, so you probably didn't jot it down in your baby diary, but but it's like that moment where like maybe you'd be doing something completely different now. Like that was sort of like the first thing, like this random encounter on a street that sort of kind of created that domino effect to all the different things that eventually led to you moving to California and wanting to follow this dream. Interesting.
It is kind of interesting what happens to people, isn't it? I don't know what you believe in. I don't believe in coincidences, but I do believe in serendipity. There is a difference.
I'm with you 100% on that. I don't believe in coincidences either. I always say that. Like, anytime like something weird happens, you're like,
it's like serendipity, or not so sure about fate. I don't really believe in fate either, but I do believe in people knowing what they want, but maybe it's just subconsciously, and then attracting to them what is required to get that or do that. Because I was already studying dance, and so there was already that creative drive. I was born with it. I knew that. My mother knew it. And I don't know if it was a surprise to my mother or not that this happened. I don't know. But yeah, it is interesting when you think about your life and you think about if this piece hadn't fallen into place, then that piece might not have fallen into place. I know that I would still have been a performer because that was already in me. But the fact that I could make money at 3, wow, that was pretty cool. And it is interesting. I've talked to so many people who have similar experiences. If I hadn't been on that, I don't know, in that cafe at that time and, dropped my napkin, I wouldn't have met my wife, that sort of thing. Or if I hadn't stopped my car at that moment, I would have been hit. I mean, just things like that.
Totally. Like I mean, one quick for me is like, I got invited to be a counselor at this weekend for kids who have divorced parents, and they were with one of the parents there. And I said no, because I was seeing Paul McCartney on Friday. And they're like, just come on Saturday. I'm like, so I came on Saturday. met my wife. We've been married.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you imagine? I almost didn't get married because of Paul McCartney.
That's right. It would have been Paul's fault.
Totally.
It would have been all his fault.
100%.
You could have written him a letter, and said, I'm not married and I'm lonely and it's all your fault. Because I felt like I was whatever. But yeah, things like that. I think things like that happen all the time. I was driving home the other day and I almost got killed. And it's hard to explain, but I was coming down an off-ramp from the freeway. And right at the bottom of that off-ramp is a stoplight. And then there's an intersection. And I wasn't paying a great deal of attention, but just enough. And I had the green light, the cross path did not. I drove into the intersection and I happened to notice because I normally wouldn't be like watching the street on my left, but I happened to notice a car. And when you're in a dangerous situation, how fast you think, lightning speed, you're like a computer. And I noticed this car and I went through this whole chain of thoughts. Is he going to stop? What's going on with that car? Should I continue through the intersection? I think I better just stop here instead of continue. And this whole thing happened, in a millisecond like it does. He blew that stoplight so fast. And as he was coming toward me, because I had stopped dead in the middle of the intersection because of him or it. I don't know if it was a male or female, sorry. And then my next thought process was, I'm glad I stopped. And this was all in a millisecond. I'm glad I stopped. He's going to hit the front of my car. He won't broadside me in the driver's side. He'll hit the front of the car. Maybe I'll survive it. This whole process, my car will probably spin. And then he blew right past me. I swear he missed me by a quarter of an inch. I was in such shock and I started moving again. And then I'm so angry that now he's like halfway down the block. I start honking really loud like a moron. And he never slowed down. He never stopped. He never did anything. And I thought to myself, wow, I just cheated death because I would have been killed. It's one of those moments. If I hadn't not gone through because I didn't go through the intersection fast, I just kind of was like, going. And then if I hadn't seen him out of the corner of my eye, and if I hadn't thought, wow, I don't think he's going to stop. All those things, go through your mind. It's a similar situation to, being 3 years old and discovered on the streets of Dallas and then going on a Saturday to the camp instead of on a Friday because of Paul McCartney and you meet your wife. That's all those little moments in life.
Well, I'm glad you're still alive, Lee.
I am. Oh my God. After that happened and I made my left-hand turn and then I started shaking. And so I just pulled over to the side of the road and I just cried and cried out of relief, just pure relief. And then I called my husband and I said, this happened. And he's like, my God, I said, yeah, you could have been getting a very different kind of phone call at this point.
Wasn't meant to be.
And I said that. I said, not my day to go. But things like that happen all the time in life and always fascinating to me.
I agree, 100%. I had something similar happen. It was when you were telling the story, I kind of had shivers because I hadn't thought about it in years. And then I just vividly thought about it the other day. And I never really told anyone. I was pulling out of my daughter's school. As I was pulling out, two kids on the bike. There was a bike trail that went across the road. And two kids flew right in front of me. And I stopped the car. And normally I would have just kept going. But I turned my head and one of the girls just happened to look back. And then I had this feeling she wasn't looking back at me. So I stopped the car. And as I stopped the car, a little kid flew in front of the car. And so I was like...
On foot or on bicycle?
Bike. But it was like, I always thought to myself, oh my God, if that girl hadn't just looked back and it hadn't been me and it had been like a teenager or something like that. I was like, this kid is, who knows what he's, what I mean? It was like, and he doesn't even know it happened. And it was just like,
my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. If she hadn't looked back, if you hadn't been aware that she was looking back and not at you and, oh my gosh.
No, he did. What's weirder is like, I never even talk about it. And then you're telling like a similar, like a story, like the same vibes of the universe kind of going. So I was like, anyway, I totally get it.
Yeah. So those things happen. I mean, those things happen all the time.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt my conversation with Lee Purcell, but we have to take a quick break. I do want to thank everyone for their support of the sponsors. When you support the sponsors, you're supporting us here at Classic Conversations, and that's how we keep the lights on. And now back to my conversation with Lee Purcell. We're going to dive into the Hollywood radio players, and we're back. So interesting. As I was prepping for our conversation, I discovered your very cool project, the Hollywood radio players. I just love this whole idea of bringing radio to life.
Thank you.
What was the impetus of this project?
Well, what we do for people who are listening and haven't seen it, I would love for everybody to see it, is we recreate classic radio plays from the 1920s through the 40s, a few into the 50s and 60s, but radio was changing at that time, as I'm sure you know. And because we are radio nerds and we love radio and we love classic radio and we love all the classic radio plays. So we performed live for a long time, and then the pandemic hit. And like all theater companies, we were shut down and we could not perform live anymore. We were trying to figure it out, a bunch of us in the group trying to figure it out as to, well, what are we going to do? It was very frustrating. We were shut down because of the pandemic, and we were frustrated because we wanted to keep performing. And I had seen a friend of mine who was a very well-known actor, and he was doing a very funny thing. There was a group of other actors, another group, and they were doing a spoof on a soap opera, on people who were in soap operas. And not that they all were, actually, maybe some of them were, but as actors doing the spoof on people, actors in soap operas who were shut down. And so I was watching this. It was very funny, but it was very simple. What we do isn't simple, but this was very simple. It was early on because, we perform on Zoom. They were performing on Zoom because Zoom, as you know, was created for corporate and for business meetings and so forth. It's not created to perform on. It is not made for that. So I was watching that. So I thought maybe we could do this. So I took it back to the group and said, what if we tried this? And so we did. We started doing it and archiving the shows. And it was very difficult because, like I said, Zoom is not made for a complicated performance, and ours are quite complicated. But we got better as we went along. We started doing it more. And then because the Motion Picture and Television Fund was, knee deep in the pandemic by that time and having a kind of a hard time because there was such a great need. Motion Picture and Television Fund, for those who don't know, there are three primary industry organizations that help people in the industry in all phases of the industry, all levels of the industry. And Motion Picture and Television Fund, I had already been doing some work with them because I'm a union activist. And we started talking about, these shows, they should benefit something because we couldn't get paid. Who'd pay us? There wasn't anybody. But we thought, well, we can raise money for an organization. And so I went to Motion Picture and Television Fund, MPTF, because it's a long name to say, and they were thrilled. So we put a link into our shows and started putting our shows up on YouTube. And then the link goes directly, still there, we still use the same link. The link goes directly to MPTF. And people can watch our shows for free if they like, but if they are so inclined and they have some spare money, they can donate through that link to MPTF, and it is a 501c3, and it is a purely nonprofit organization, and we get none of the money. And we've been doing it now, doing that aspect of it for, over a year. I'm going to say a year and a half, maybe. And during that time, we have improved. We've gotten better technically. We have all different kinds of people in the group who have different skill sets, but everybody, of course, is an actor. Plus, maybe they're an editor or director. But Michael Carnegie, my producing partner, and I produce it. We're the sole producers. And so it's gotten better, and it's gotten more elaborate and more complicated, more complex, more difficult to edit because Zoom is very difficult to edit in. It's different. Not that it's more difficult than film or television. It's just different. Different types of layers in Zoom. And for a show. And we do comedies, we do dramas, and we have a good time. And we do raise money for this very worthy charity. And that's how it started.
That's awesome. I love that. It's such a great project. But before we dive into some individual ones, what it inspired me to look up,
What?
it inspired me to look up just like the heyday of radio. Like you could talk about like radio was bold, more bold than TV, right? The rules.
Oh, much. Oh, much, much.
And when I was reading about, just the transition when radio came about to TV, it was just interesting in the context, putting it in today's context as it relates to the speed of which we're used to things in terms of social media and email and immediate gratification. So radio was invented in, let's say 1895, kind of came into its own around 1900. But before that, it was the telegraph. So it would take days to get something, and probably a horse. Let's do the radio thing, make a horse noise. But I was reading, like, it's interesting. And then radio comes around, and now it's like people can hear things simultaneously. Can you imagine thinking if there was a time when that wasn't a thing? Well, there was.
It was. You're right. Radio is, to me, a very important medium that television owes everything to, because at that time when radio came into play, mainly later in the 20s, right, there were silent films. Talkies were just starting to come in, and there were stage plays if you happened to live in an area that had theater. And then there was nothing else. There was no internet, there was no television, there was no streaming, there were no cell phones, iPhones, nothing, right? But along came radio, and that was incredibly powerful. And the radios then were these big, beautiful pieces of furniture that had a radio in it. And the whole family would gather around, say they wanted to listen to Fibber McGee and Molly, which was a very, very popular radio show. We will be doing one of those eventually. And so the whole family would, gather around. Now, if it was like a really scary show, they'd send the kids to bed. And if it was something that was kind of risque, which they did do, then the kids would be in another room doing a jigsaw puzzle. So it was fascinating. And we do owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to radio, to those early radio dramas and comedies. They had comedies, dramedies, game shows, sports, you name it, musicals, everything you can think of, variety shows, everything you can think of that ended up on TV started in radio. And a lot of the major shows that ended up being in early TV, like some of the shows that we have done, such as Gunsmoke or Our Miss Brooks or Life of Riley and so forth, those were all radio series first. And some of them have a very interesting backstory, like Gunsmoke, which on radio starred William Conrad, whom I ended up working with years later on a project and a couple of projects. So William Conrad was, for those of you who are familiar with Gunsmoke, and those of you who are not, you might really enjoy watching our show. And one thing I need to say is that our radio plays are radio you can see, obviously, because we're on Zoom, and we do special effects and sound effects and all kinds of music and all kinds of different things that actual radio without a visual could not do. And so we have invented that, created that. So going back to Gunsmoke, Gunsmoke was an incredibly popular radio series, Western, and it ran for years. And the star of it was William Conrad, and who became a TV star later. And they wanted to expand into TV series, like so many of the radio series were doing. But William Conrad was told he could not go with the TV series because he didn't look like, he had an incredible voice, but he did not look like your ideal of a Western sheriff in the early days of the West. He was short, he was stocky, and he just didn't look like that. So John Wayne suggested for the TV show that they see this new guy called James Arness. And James Arness fit it perfectly visually, beautiful voice, great actor. And so he did that role in TV for 20 years. James Arness did. It ran for 20 years. But William Conrad kept doing the radio series. So it was simultaneous, which was very rare. That wasn't a common thing in early radio. It wasn't common. But they did that for several years. And then William Conrad eventually moved into television in roles that were right for him. And he became a big TV star. So we owe a lot to radio. And like I said, we're radio nerds. We love radio. And what has been, many things have been astonishing to us, actually, about doing this. But one of the astonishing things is kids. Kids love our shows. I mean, little kids, 5, 6 years old. And millenniums, is that how you say it? Millennial, whatever. They love our show. And families love our show because they're clean. We don't do things that kids should not see. We don't do those things. But we do interesting things. And some of our shows are scary, like The Hitchhiker is scary. Now, The Hitchhiker, which is very interesting, backstory to that. The Hitchhiker, which is a ghost story, which was our Halloween show this past year. The Hitchhiker was so popular that Twilight Zone took this episode, took The Hitchhiker, and made pretty much word for word episode of Twilight Zone from The Hitchhiker, the radio show. So that's another example of TV benefiting and using shows from early radio.
It kind of makes sense if you think about it, in the sense that the evolution, I mean, because radio, a lot of the magic of the radio shows was so vividly painting the picture. So once the technology came around that they could actually create the visual that matched the words that the actors are saying, it was you can see where it was kind of a natural evolution from radio TV.
It was, but it also killed a certain aspect of radio because you rarely hear any of those early shows, those classic shows anymore. If you dig around, you can find them. I mean, we're very good at finding them, but that's what we do.
Sorry to interrupt. Have to take a quick break. And we're back with Lee Purcell. We're going to dive into the early origins of her love of radio.
But you very rarely hear it. Whereas Michael, my producing partner, and I both came to love radio in a very similar way, but at a different time. I was living in London and studying acting in London. And I began to listen to the BBC, which is they have many channels on BBC, British Broadcasting Company. And I discovered radio comedy on the BBC, but it was all new. It wasn't like sometimes you can find it in America on radio, but it's all old. And whereas ours is new, even though we use the original scripts. And so I just became completely enamored of radio dramas and comedies. And then Michael, as a kid, he used to listen to Star Wars on radio in America. And so he came to it, even though he too studied in London, but at a different time. And he listened to BBC, but he really fell in love with it from listening to Star Wars on radio as a kid, which I thought was very interesting. And so I do think TV owes a tremendous debt of gratitude to classic radio. I think it does, because when it split up, when radio and television kind of divvied things up, TV got all of the scripted content, and it got sports, and it got news. But radio also got news, sports, but they gave up the game shows, the scripted content. They gave it all up. But I just find the whole thing fascinating, because I had a millennium, I hope I'm saying that right, not sure, say to me recently, podcasts are our radio. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And she said, couldn't you do a podcast of your shows as well? Because I'd like to listen to it when I'm driving in the car. And I said, or working out at the gym or whatever, right? And I said, well, you can. You just have to turn off the video. That's all. It's really easy. And just listen to the show. She said, yeah, but I'd like to be able to find it on a platform, not have to have my phone in the car and get on there. And then I said, you're right. And we are heading in that direction eventually. But I think everything comes full circle. And you pointed that out earlier. And it does. It all comes full circle. And I think that's what's happening with our show, because we do have audiences we would never expect, demographics we would never expect. And then also the numbers we're getting, we would never expect. Our other shows are trying to catch up with War of the Worlds. War of the Worlds, the last time I checked about a week ago, it had over 16,000 views. And I thought, wow, that's really extraordinary. That's just extraordinary. Michael and I were trying to figure that out. And, we kind of did. I think we figured it out. But what War of the Worlds, because we did the original 1938 script. We didn't do the later iterations of it. And I had worked with Orson Welles when I was just starting out as an actress. And I just admired him so much. And I really saw who he was. He was a towering figure in so many ways. And when he did War of the Worlds that Halloween night, 1938, and he on, can't remember which network it was, maybe NBC, but it's in the intro. We have an intro to every show. We have
CBS.
CBS, thank you very much. On CBS, I think he was about 27 at the time. He was already a top Broadway producer. He had 3 hit Broadway plays running simultaneously while he was doing Mercury Theater with John Houseman, whom I also knew when I was very young. And this came along and it just shot him over the moon. And I just find the whole thing very interesting, what happened. And if you watch, we have 2 wonderful hosts for Hollywood Radio Players. Our first host was Tom Bergeron, and he did our first 7 shows. We love him, and he's going to come back, and he's going to do Maltese Falcon with us, playing Sam Spade. He is off prepping a movie with William Shatner. And so then we got lucky again, and we got Leeza Gibbons, who people will know from Entertainment Tonight for a very long time. She's incredible. And we got very lucky with our hosts. And then, but for War of the Worlds, I did an intro because I was so personally connected to it, and I did direct it, and I fought to do it. And nobody wanted me to do it because it's really complex to do on so many levels. And we did it, and I think it turned out really well. I talk about a lot of things in my intro there, about things that you've heard about, read about, and some are true and some are not true. And you should watch it. That's all.
I did watch it. You touched on the controversy, which I always grew up thinking the whole world thought it was real. Everyone was in chaos. It's whole interesting mythos behind that you brought up. But I'll let everyone go listen to you talk about it. We'll use it to drive them.
I want everybody to watch it and listen, because I did a huge amount of research on that, as I do on every show, because I write everything for the shows except for the plays, but I write all the intros and the extraneous and the promo and all of that. And then we have these incredible hosts who make the intro I write their own, and they do it so brilliantly. I know I had to do an intro to one of our shows recently because we were in between hosts. Tom had moved on and Lisa couldn't start yet. So I had to do an intro, and I thought I was going to die. It was
next time you call me, Lee.
I will call you.
I got it.
It's a different skill set. It's just, I can introduce like I did War of the Worlds. That's a different thing. But to do the host intro, that is not my thing. So I was really happy when Lisa was free to start, because that is a very unique skill set.
Here's my audition. It's radio. You can see. That's my best, Tom Bergeron.
That's great.
So I started watching the Dragnet one as well. And I realized that Dragnet, some of these I didn't realize, to be honest, started on radio. So this was my aha moment as I was kind of digging into all this. And I realized Dragnet is basically the first true crime podcast.
You know what? You're right. It totally was, because all of the episodes come from the files of the Los Angeles Police Department. And it did start. Dragnet started on radio, and maybe people listening are not old enough to even know the TV show, but it was wildly popular for a very long time. And it had the same cast, and it was amazingly done. And the delivery was so dry and matter of fact. I loved their delivery. And then I didn't direct that one. One of our other people directed that one. I do have a small part in it. I don't usually, when I'm directing, I usually do like a couple of lines if I'm forced into it, as I was this most recent one that we just posted about a week ago, the Bickersons. and I have like 2 lines or something. And that one is a comedy, and it was on and off for about 20 years with the same 2 actors, Don Amici and Francis Langford, who was a famous big band singer. Don Amici was quite a big film star, but he kept doing this radio show for 20 years. And then they eventually moved into TV with it, not as a series, but as a skit on different variety shows and so forth. And so we did that, and that was really fun. I watched it. I had to watch it again. And I started laughing out loud. And I thought, I'm laughing at this. I directed it. I cast it. It makes me laugh. It's such a good show. So funny. And then we have this, recently we have upped our game, and we have a great costumer now, Sean LeBlanc, and he owns a big costume house, and he's in his guild, which luckily they are not on strike. And we did okay with the costumes, doing them ourselves, but now we have really fabulous costumes. And even though you only see us from the chest up, well, I felt it was very important, so did Michael, that because now we're into season 2, Precursor is episode 1 of season 2, because our seasons are nine shows. And we thought, no, we're gonna up our game on that. And we're gonna get a costume. And we got, the best. He is so incredibly good. So we did that, and we became a union signatory. So we have all those protections. And then, unlike a lot of the other shows right now, because as everybody in the world knows, SAG-AFTRA is on strike, we are allowed to promote Hollywood radio players, and we're also allowed to keep shooting because of the particular contract. I won't bore you with all those details, but the particular contract category that we fall under. So we're allowed to keep going where most shows are not. So we're very fortunate there, because also it's important to harken back to Motion Picture and Television Fund, because that would be horrible if we had to stop, and then that would, cut off a source of income, a revenue stream to Motion Picture and Television Fund. So it's all good. It helps everybody.
It's amazing. The project's amazing. And then
thank you.
Lee, share the web address where everyone can kind of home base and find where all the videos are. You can then get to YouTube from there, but all of them are in one nice package, and you can find the charity link there as well.
We have a website, HollywoodRadioPlayers.com, and you can go there, and there's a drop-down menu of our shows, and you can just kind of pick and choose whatever show you want. You click on the show, and then it takes you directly to our YouTube channel, and the show will start. And then within the YouTube channel, within the show, Leeza or Tom, whoever is hosting that particular show, does tell you what is they actually point like down there. Well, you can't see me, but you can see me, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
But
Lee is pointing at the show notes, which you can click to, and there'll be links to everything she's saying right there, so you can click and watch these awesome shows.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining that. Yeah. Because I always think, everybody can see me all the time, because radio you can see, but that's not true. So yeah, you can click on the show notes, and then right there is the link. If you choose to donate, then you can donate right there. And it's hands off. We have nothing to do with that. It just sweeps it right into Motion Picture and Television Fund, which is great, which is very helpful and very, very kind and generous.
Amazing. I love the work that you do. I'm so excited that we were able to talk about this awesome project.
Too. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for hanging out with me, Lee.
It's been great, Jeff.
All right. How awesome was Lee Purcell? Everyone definitely check out the Hollywood Radio Players. All the links are in the show notes for the episode. You can head over to thehollywoodradioplayers.com, hop over to YouTube from there. You can make a donation to the MPTF, the Motion Picture and Television Fund. But definitely watch these Radio You Can See programs that they put on from the original radio scripts. Amazing. So cool. You're going to love it. Check it out. Can't believe we're at the end of another episode. Huge thank you to Lee Purcell. And of course, a huge thank you to all of you for coming back week after week. It means the world to me. And I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Classic Conversations. If you like what you heard, don't be shy and give us a follow on your favorite podcast app. Also, why not go ahead and tell all your friends about the show? You strike us as the kind of person that people listen to. Thanks in advance for spreading the word, and we'll catch you next time on Classic Conversations.